A phone call that lasts only 90 seconds is all it takes to shatter a perfect life. For Lara, pregnant and waiting in her marble-floored mansion, the ultrasound of her first child was meant to be a shared joy. But her millionaire husband, Damien, isn't coming. He's closing a deal, he says, his voice cold and distant. But as his mother arrives, her face a mask of grim determination, and insists on driving her. Making a strange stop to pick up the family lawyer, Lara feels a terrifying chill. This isn't about a missed appointment. It's about a secret so devastating it's about to unravel everything. The silence in the house was the first thing that always struck Lara as unsettling. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the hollow, echoing quiet of a museum after hours. Each of her footsteps on the imported Italian marble of the grand foyer seemed to announce her solitude, a sound swallowed by the cavernous ceilings and absorbed by the cold modern art that Damien had insisted upon. Their home, a sprawling, minimalist masterpiece perched on a Los Angeles hillside, felt less like a home and more like a testament to her husband's success, a beautiful, sterile cage. Today, however, a nervous energy buzzed beneath her skin, a happy hum that temporarily filled the void. At 20 weeks pregnant, she was finally starting to show a gentle, promising curve to her belly that she cradled protectively. This was the day of the anatomy scan, the day they would see their baby, in intricate detail for the first time, 10 perfect fingers, 10 tiny toes. The day it would all feel irrevocably real. She had laid out her clothes the night before, a soft cashmere dress in a shade of pale blue that complemented the soft glow she'd acquired. In the nursery, a room she'd fought to paint in a warm, creamy white instead of the slate grey Damien's designer had chosen, everything was ready. A tiny pair of sneakers, a gift from her own mother, sat on the dresser. A poignant symbol of the little person about to turn their world upside down. Lara glanced at the clock on the kitchen's sleek digital interface. 10:30 a.m. Damien should have been home by now. He had promised. No matter what Izzy he'd said, kissing her forehead before leaving 2 days ago for a business trip to Singapore. I'll be on the 6 a.m. flight. I won't miss seeing our baby for the first time. Nothing is more important. She had believed him. She had chosen to believe him just as she had chosen to overlook the increasing number of late nights, the hushed, tense phone calls he would take in his glass-walled office, and the way his gaze sometimes seemed to look straight through her, his mind a million miles away, crunching numbers she couldn't comprehend. He was Damien Ashford, a wunderkind of the tech investment world. His pressure was immense, his schedule grueling. That was the price of the life they lived, the life he provided. At 10:45 a.m., her phone finally rang, flashing his name on the screen. A wave of relief washed over her. Damien. I was starting to get worried. Are you on your way? She asked, her voice bright. The line crackled for a moment before his voice came through clipped and devoid of warmth. Lara. Listen. Something's come up. Her stomach tightened. What do you mean? The appointment is at noon. We need to leave soon. I'm not in LA. I'm still in Singapore, he said, the words hitting her with a physical force. The deal here, it's at a critical stage. I can't leave. It's a make-or-break moment for the firm. Lara sank onto one of the ridiculously uncomfortable bar stools that lined the kitchen island. You promised Damien. You promised this was the one thing you wouldn't miss. Her voice trembled, a pathetic sound in the vast, empty room. "Don't be dramatic." He scoffed, a familiar, condescending edge to his tone. "It's an ultrasound. They'll give you pictures, won't they? We can look at them together when I get back. This is a billion-dollar negotiation, Lara. It requires my full attention. I need you to be understanding." Understanding. The word felt like a slap. She was always the understanding one. Understanding of the cancelled dates, the lonely holidays, the life that revolved entirely around his relentless ambition. "When will you be back?" she asked quietly, the fight already draining out of her. "A few days. Maybe a week. I don't know. I have to go. They're waiting for me." And with that, the line went dead. She stared at the phone, tears welling in her eyes and blurring the pristine view of the city below. He hadn't even said he was sorry. He hadn't asked about the baby. It was just a transaction, a scheduling conflict to be brushed aside. The excitement that had filled her morning curdled into a familiar, sour mix of disappointment and loneliness. She felt foolish sitting there in her pretty blue dress, waiting for a man who was never really there. She was contemplating calling the doctor to cancel when the chime of the front gate echoed through the house. The security panel showed a black sedan she recognized. It was her mother-in-law, Catherine Ashford. Lara's heart sank a little further. Catherine was a formidable woman, cut from the same expensive, unyielding cloth as her son. Their interactions were always polite but strained, punctuated by Catherine's thinly veiled assessments of Lara's suitability as a wife for a man like Damien. Lara buzzed her in and smoothed down her dress, wiping her eyes as she walked to the door. She would have to put on a brave face, pretend Damien had been called away for a heroic, world-saving reason. But when Catherine stepped inside, her usually impeccable composure seemed off. Her tailored Chanel suit was perfect, her silver hair coiffed, but her eyes a sharp, intelligent blue. So like Damien's, held a flicker of something Lara had never seen before, anxiety. "Lara," she said, her voice crisp, but lacking its usual icy edge. "You're ready, I see." "Good." "Catherine." "What a surprise," Lara stammered. "Damien, he got held up. In Singapore. A last-minute emergency with his deal." She waited for the sympathetic but slightly superior response. She expected something along the lines of course, my son's work is so very important." Instead, Catherine looked at her, her gaze intense. "I know. He called me an hour ago." She paused, her eyes scanning Lara's face, taking in the tear-streaked cheeks and the forced smile. "Go get your purse. I'm driving you to your appointment." Lara was taken aback. "Oh no, you don't have to do that. I can reschedule." "Nonsense." Catherine cut her off, her tone leaving no room for argument. "You are not missing this appointment, and you are not going alone. We'll be late. Let's go." There was an urgency in Catherine's demeanor that was both confusing and alarming. It felt like more than a mother-in-law simply stepping in for her absent son. Something else was happening, a current of tension running just beneath the surface of this strange, command-like invitation. Feeling a new wave of unease, Lara did as she was told, grabbing her purse from the counter and following her mother-in-law out of the silent, gilded cage. She called home. The interior of Catherine's Mercedes was the polar opposite of Lara's home, plush, quiet, and comforting. But the atmosphere inside was thick with unspoken words. Catherine drove with a focused intensity, her gloved hands gripping the wheel, her jaw set. She hadn't offered any further explanation for her sudden appearance, and Lara, intimidated, as always, didn't dare ask. She stared out the window at the palm trees blurring past her mind, a whirlwind of confusion. Why was Catherine so insistent? It was completely out of character. Their relationship was built on a foundation of polite distance. Catherine saw Lara as a beautiful, if somewhat simple, addition to the Ashford dynasty, a woman to produce an heir and host a flawless charity gala, not a confidant. Yet here she was, ferrying her to a doctor's appointment with the grim determination of a general leading troops into battle. "Damien is incredibly focused," Lara said, attempting to fill the silence to normalize the situation. "He gets so absorbed in his work. It's what makes him so successful." Catherine made a non-committal sound in her throat. Focus is a virtue. Obsession, however, can be a liability. The comment hung in the air, sharp and ambiguous. Before Lara could dissect it, Catherine made a sudden turn, diverting from the most direct route to the medical plaza. "Where are we going?" Lara asked, a fresh spike of anxiety piercing through her. "The doctor's office is on Santa Monica Boulevard. We're making a brief stop. There's someone I need to pick up," Catherine stated, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. "He'll be joining us." "Joining us?" "For the ultrasound." Lara's voice rose in disbelief. Who could possibly be joining them? Catherine turned into the parking garage of a sleek black glass high-rise in Century City. She pulled into a reserved spot near the elevators. Not for the ultrasound itself, no, but he needs to be present for the conversation afterward. Conversation. What conversation? Lara's heart was starting to hammer against her ribs. This was wrong. All of it was wrong. Damien's cold dismissal. Catherine's bizarre behavior. It was all connected, a puzzle she couldn't begin to solve. Patience. Lara. Catherine said, though her own seemed to be wearing thin. She tapped an elegant finger on the steering wheel. A moment later, the elevator door slid open, and a man in a perfectly tailored grey suit walked towards them. He was in his late 50s with a calm, serious face and spectacles perched on his nose. Lara recognized him instantly. Arthur Harrison, the Ashford family's longtime lawyer. He had handled the paperwork for their house, a remote and imposing figure she had met only twice. He opened the rear door and slid in the scent of old paper and expensive cologne filling the car. "Catherine." He nodded his voice, a low, steady baritone. "Lara. It's good to see you. My congratulations on your pregnancy. Arthur." Catherine acknowledged. "Thank you for meeting us on such short notice." "Of course," he said. The circumstances seemed to warrant it. His eyes met Lara's in the rearview mirror, and his expression was one of gentle pity. It was the look of a man who was about to deliver terrible news. Lara felt the floor drop out from beneath her. "I don't understand," she said, her voice shaking. "Why is our lawyer coming to my baby appointment? Did something happen to Damien?" A new horrifying thought took root. An accident, a medical emergency he was hiding. "Damien is fine physically," Catherine said, pulling out of the garage and back onto the street. "This is about business. Family business. What does that have to do with me? Or this?" She asked, her hand instinctively covering her stomach. It was Arthur Harrison who answered, his voice calm and measured a stark contrast to the panic rising in Lara's chest. Sometimes Lara family and business assets become deeply intertwined. Catherine has some concerns about recent decisions Damien has made. We felt it was prudent to create a clear line of communication. It was the most elegant, evasive non-answer she had ever heard. Concerns. What kind of concerns? She pressed, looking from Catherine's rigid profile to Arthur's reflection in the mirror. Catherine sighed a long, weary sound. Damien has become reckless. He's liquidating assets that have been in this family for generations, trust funds his father set up. He's moving vast sums of money around without consulting anyone. When I questioned him, he became hostile. He told me to trust his genius and stay out of his affairs. He's under a lot of pressure. Lara defended weakly, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. This is beyond pressure, Arthur Harrison interjected gently. This is erratic behavior. Catherine asked me to look into some of the holding companies he's been using. What I've found is opaque, unorthodox even for a man as aggressive in business as Damien. He paused. We believe it's important to ensure that you and the baby are protected, that your futures are secure regardless of the outcome of his current ventures. Protected. Secure. The words were legal sterile, but their implication was terrifying. They were talking as if Damien was a sinking ship from which they needed to rescue the passengers. The man she was married to, the father of her child, was being discussed as a threat, a liability. Lara leaned her head back against the cool leather of the seat, the reality of the situation beginning to dawn. This wasn't a mere intervention about a work-life balance. Catherine and Arthur Harrison suspected something was profoundly wrong with Damien's business, something that could have catastrophic consequences for the entire family. And they had brought the family lawyer to a prenatal appointment because in their world, a new heir was not just a baby. It was an asset to be secured. The strange, unexpected alliance between her and her formidable mother-in-law was now clear. It wasn't born of affection, but of necessity. Catherine wasn't there to comfort her. She was there to protect the Ashford legacy and its newest member from her own son. The cold, empty seat that should have been filled by Damien suddenly felt like a chasm, a dark space representing not just a missed appointment, but a terrifying betrayal she was only just beginning to comprehend. The waiting room of the perinatologist's office was decorated in calming shades of beige and rose, but for Lara the place felt charged with a clinical, terrifying tension. Arthur Harrison sat in a chair across from them, discreetly reading through a file the picture of professional detachment. Catherine sat beside Lara, rigid and silent, a marble statue of maternal concern. Lara felt like a specimen under a microscope, her private joy now a matter of legal and financial urgency. When the technician called her name, Catherine stood. "I'm coming with you," she stated simply. Lara nodded, too numb to argue. Arthur gave her a small, encouraging smile as they left a silent promise to be there when the ordeal was over. Inside the darkened room, the technician, a warm woman named Maria, instructed Lara to lie back. The cool gel on her stomach was a shock, and she flinched. "Just relax, honey," Maria said kindly. "Let's take a look at this little one." The moment the transducer touched her skin, and the grainy black and white image flickered to life on the screen, the noise in Lara's head fell away. There on the monitor was a miracle. A tiny, perfect spine, a fluttering heart, a head with a distinct nose. She could see the chambers of the heart beating the flow of blood, a pulsing red and blue on the screen. "Everything looks wonderful," Maria narrated, her voice a soothing balm. There's the brain, kidneys, a strong heartbeat at 155 beats per minute. Perfect. Tears streamed silently down Lara's face, not tears of sorrow or fear, but of overwhelming love. This was real. This tiny, active person was her child. In this room, away from the talk of assets and liabilities, none of the outside world mattered. And, would you like to know the gender? Maria asked, a twinkle in her eye. Lara looked at Catherine, who was staring at the screen, her stoic facade having finally cracked. There were tears glistening in her mother-in-law's eyes, too. In that shared moment, they were not a socialite and her daughter-in-law. They were just two women, a mother and a grandmother, marveling at the beginning of a new life. Yes, Lara whispered. Please. Maria moved the probe, typed a few commands, and then smiled. Well, congratulations, ladies. You have a very healthy, very active little boy, a son. Lara let out a sob that was half laugh, half cry. A boy. She could almost picture him, a miniature version of Damien, but with, she hoped, a gentler heart. Catherine reached out and squeezed her hand, a gesture so unexpected and so genuinely warm that it made Lara's tears flow faster. A boy, Catherine repeated softly, her voice thick with emotion. His father would have been so proud. She was referring to her late husband, a man whose legacy Damien was apparently putting at risk. After the scan was complete, and Lara held a folder of glossy photos of her son, they returned to the waiting room. The joy of the last 30 minutes had armed her with a new fragile strength. This wasn't just about her anymore. She had a son to protect. Arthur Harrison had arranged for them to use a small private consultation room. He closed the door behind them, and the clinical reality of their situation returned. He is perfect, Catherine said, her voice still soft, as she looked at the ultrasound pictures in Lara's hand. She then looked at Arthur, her expression hardening with resolve. Which is why we cannot afford to be sentimental right now. She turned to Lara, her gaze direct and serious. Lara, what Arthur and I told you in the car was only the surface. We didn't want to alarm you before the appointment. But now you need to know what we are truly facing. Arthur Harrison took over, his tone grave. Damien has taken out a number of high-interest unsecured loans against the core assets of Ashford Investments. He's done this through a series of newly created shell corporations. It's a classic move to hide debt and liability. The problem is the people he is borrowing from are not reputable banks. They are private lenders who operate in the financial grey markets. They are ruthless. Lara felt a chill creep up her spine. But why? The company is successful. We're rich. The word sounded naive and foolish even as she said it. We were, Catherine corrected grimly. The family fortune was stable, built on decades of sound conservative investment by my husband. Damien, in his arrogance, thought he could do better faster. He has been pouring money into a series of incredibly high-risk tech ventures, and from what we can gather, they are failing. Catastrophically. He told me he was on the verge of $1 billion success. Lara whispered the memory of his voice on the phone, now sounding like a cruel joke. He's lying, Arthur said bluntly, but not unkindly. He's not on the verge of success. He's on the verge of collapse. He's running a confidence game, using the family's good name and the last of its liquid capital to stay afloat, likely hoping for one miraculous win to cover the losses. But the hole is too deep. We're talking about a debt that could potentially exceed the entire value of the family's estate. The scope of it was unimaginable. It wasn't just Damien's money. It was everything. The house, the cars, the legacy. This is why his behavior has changed. Catherine continued, her voice tight, with a mixture of anger and grief. The secrecy, the hostility, the lies. It is the behavior of a desperate man. Arthur leaned forward slightly. Lara, we need your help. You are his wife. You live in that house. You see him every day. Have you noticed anything else? Anything out of the ordinary? Any new names? Strange meetings? Documents left around? Even the smallest detail could help us understand the full picture of who he is involved with. Lara's mind raced, sifting through months of small, dismissible moments that now seemed sinister. The way he would quickly shut his laptop when she entered the room. The second personal cell phone he claimed was just for international business. The nights he didn't come home at all, claiming he was sleeping at a hotel downtown to get an early start. And then a memory surfaced. Something she had completely forgotten. His office, she said, her voice barely a whisper. At home, it's always locked. He told me the cleaning staff isn't even allowed in there, that it's too sensitive. He calls it his vault. Catherine and Arthur exchanged a significant look. He has a safe in there, Lara continued, the pieces clicking into place with sickening speed. A large, freestanding one, behind a painting. I saw it once when the door was ajar. Arthur Harrison's calm demeanor sharpened. Does he ever open it when you are around? No. Never, she said. The place was a black box in the center of their home, a physical manifestation of all the secrets he was keeping. Lara, Arthur said, his voice low and serious. We believe Damien may be preparing to disappear. The way he's moving money, it's not just to cover debts. It looks like he's amassing a stockpile of untraceable cash. If he has important documents, passports, or anything else related to this plan, they would be in that safe. The implication was clear. He wasn't just going to lose their money. He was planning to run, to leave her behind, to deal with the fallout. Her and their unborn son. The love she had felt in the ultrasound room curdled into a cold, hard knot of fury. The image of Damien's charming smile was replaced by that of a coward and a thief. When we get back to the house, Lara said, her voice steady and clear, imbued with a strength she didn't know she possessed, I'm getting into that office. Returning to the mansion felt like entering a crime scene. The sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, glinting off the polished chrome and glass, but the light only seemed to emphasize the house's cold, empty soul. The silence was no longer just unsettling. It was menacing. Catherine and Arthur had dropped her off, making a plan to reconnect as soon as she had anything to report. They had offered to stay, but Lara knew this was something she had to do alone. Invading her husband's inner sanctum felt like a final, intimate betrayal, and she couldn't bear to have an audience. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she stood before the solid oak door of Damien's office. It was, as always, locked. She tried the handle, a futile, symbolic gesture. For years she had respected this boundary without question, accepting it as part of the package of being married to a powerful private man. Now she saw it for what it was, a barrier to keep her from his truth. She retrieved the emergency key from the security panel, where Damien had told her it was kept in case of a fire. The irony was bitter. A fire was indeed raging, just not the kind that could be extinguished with water. The key slid into the lock with a quiet click. Lara pushed the door open and stepped inside. The air was stale, thick with the smell of expensive leather and secrets. The room was obsessively neat. A massive obsidian desk stood in the center, its surface clear except for a sleek laptop and a photo of the two of them on their wedding day. Lara stared at the picture, at her own beaming, naive smile, and felt a wave of nausea. She turned the photo frame face down. Her target was the painting on the far wall, a dark, brooding, abstract piece she had always hated. She pulled it aside, revealing the flat grey door of a large digital safe. A keypad glowed expectantly. Panic fluttered in her chest. A code. It could be anything. His birthday. Their anniversary. She tried both. Access denied flashed in red. She tried his mother's birthday, his late father's. Nothing. She was about to give up to call Arthur and admit defeat when a different date popped into her head. Not a happy anniversary, but the date that had sealed her fate. The date he had proposed to her on a yacht in Monaco, a whirlwind fairy tale moment that had swept her off her feet. Her fingers trembled as she punched in the 6 digits 081521. There was a soft whir and a heavy clunk. The handle turned. The safe was open. For a moment, she just stared into the dark interior. Her breath held tight in her chest. It was filled with neat stacks of files, several passports from different countries bearing Damien's photo, but different names and thick bundles of cash in various currencies. It was a go bag on a corporate scale. He was ready to vanish at a moment's notice. Her eyes landed on a thick manila folder, labeled with her own name, Lara Ashford, Pre-Nuptial Agreement. Her blood ran cold. They had never signed a prenup. She was sure of it. Damien had made a grand show of telling her that prenups were for people who didn't trust each other, that their marriage was a partnership for life, not a business merger. She had been so touched, so in love. With trembling hands, she lifted the file out. Inside was a lengthy legal document, dozens of pages filled with dense, impenetrable jargon. She flipped to the last page. And there it was, her signature scrawled in blue ink right beside Damien's. She stared at it, her mind refusing to process what she was seeing. How, when? And then a memory, hazy and insignificant at the time, swam into focus. It was a few weeks before the wedding, a whirlwind of planning and excitement. They were at a title company office, signing what Damien had called the last of the paperwork for the new house. There had been a mountain of documents. He had guided her hand, pointing where to sign a pen in his hand, his smile charming and reassuring. Just a few more signatures, my love, and it's all ours. He had slipped it in. He had buried the most important document of her life in a pile of mundane property deeds, and she had signed it without a second thought, blinded by love and trust. She sank into Damien's leather chair, the room spinning around her, and forced herself to read the summary page that Arthur had likely insisted on including. It was brutal in its clarity. In the event of a divorce, she waived all rights to any and all of his current and future earnings, properties, and investments. She was entitled to a one-time lump sum payment of $50,000 and no alimony. She was in the eyes of this document, completely disposable. The entire marriage was a lie. Her role was scripted from the very beginning. She wasn't a partner. She was a temporary accessory, acquired with a clause for easy disposal. A raw, guttural sob escaped her lips. The betrayal was so profound, so complete, it felt like it was hollowing her out from the inside. But as the initial wave of grief subsided, it was replaced by a cold-hard rage. He had not just lied to her. He had underestimated her. Driven by this new fury, she plunged her hands back into the safe. Her fingers brushed against something hard and smooth, tucked deep behind the stacks of cash. She pulled it out. It was a small black burner phone, the kind used for untraceable communication. She pressed the power button. Miraculously, it wasn't password protected. The screen lit up, showing a string of recent text messages. The contact was listed only as C. The messages were a horrifying mix of business and intimacy. C. The final wire transfer is scheduled for Friday at 11 p.m. PST. Is everything ready on your end? Damien. Almost. Just have to handle one last domestic detail. The nursery is almost finished. Theatrics are exhausting. Lara's blood froze. The nursery. He was talking about their baby, about her, as a domestic detail, a piece of theatre. Don't get sentimental. Remember the plan. The Caymans are waiting. I can't wait to have you all to myself away from all this. Damien soon. She's at the 20-week appointment today. Perfect timing to keep her distracted. By the time she realizes I'm not coming back, we'll be ghosts. See, I booked our favorite suite. I'm wearing the dress you like. Damien, save it for me. Chloe. Chloe. The name hit Lara with the force of a physical blow. Chloe Dubois, Damien's chief financial officer. A chic, razor-sharp Parisian woman whom Lara had always found intimidating, but had never suspected. She had been at their wedding. She had sent a lavish gift for the baby. And all along, she had been Damien's partner in business, in bed, and in his plan to destroy Lara's life. The phone slipped from her numb fingers and clattered onto the desk. The plan was no longer a vague suspicion. It was here, in black and white. He was going to drain the company, flee the country with his lover, and leave Lara pregnant and destitute to face the wreckage and the ruthless people he owed money to. He wasn't just skipping a baby appointment. He was skipping out on his entire life and taking hers with him. Lara stood up, her body shaking not with fear, but with a chilling, absolute clarity. The grief was gone, burned away by the white-hot fire of betrayal. She picked up her own phone. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply dialed Arthur Harrison's number, her voice as cold and hard as the marble floors of the house that was never her home. "Arthur," she said, "I'm in, and I have everything." The burner phone and the fraudulent prenuptial agreement acted like a Rosetta Stone for chaos. The moment Lara relayed the contents to Arthur Harrison, a quiet but frantic storm of activity was unleashed. Arthur, who had spent a career navigating the murky waters of corporate law, recognized the pattern immediately. This wasn't just a case of a failing business. It was a carefully constructed criminal conspiracy. "He's not just running from debt," Lara Arthur explained over a conference call that included a stunned and furious Catherine. "He's running with the money. What you've described is a classic bust-out scheme. He leveraged the company's good name to the hilt, and now he's planning to abscond with the last of the liquid assets before the whole rotten structure collapses on itself." Within hours, Arthur had assembled a small elite team, a forensic accountant named Maria Flores, a bulldog of a woman known for her ability to follow a digital money trail through the most complex offshore labyrinths, and a private investigator, a former FBI agent named Ben Carter. They convened in the sterile environment of Arthur's Century City office, a war room where the weapons were spreadsheets and wire transfer records. Lara sat at the head of the table, no longer the timid, grieving wife, but the prosecution's star witness. She recounted every detail she could remember: Damien's travel schedules, the names of associates he'd mentioned, his obsession with data encryption. Every piece of information was a breadcrumb for Maria and Ben to follow. Maria Flores dove into the web of shell corporations Arthur had initially identified. With the information from the burner phone, specifically the mention of a final transfer, she knew what to look for. "He'll have created a bottleneck," she explained, her fingers flying across her keyboard, bringing up dizzying columns of numbers on a large monitor. A single account where he'll pool the cash from all the disparate sources before sending it to an untraceable destination. He's arrogant, but he won't be able to resist watching the pot grow in one place before he skips town. Meanwhile, Ben Carter focused on the human element, Chloe Dubois. He quickly pulled up her profile. She was brilliant with a sterling resume from Wharton and a rapid rise through the financial world. She had joined Damien's firm 2 years ago. To the outside world, she was his loyal, indispensable CFO. Ben's digging revealed more. She had recently acquired a passport under a different name. She had also purchased in cash 2 one-way first-class tickets to the Cayman Islands, departing from a private airfield in Van Nuys, scheduled for Friday night. The tickets were for a Mr. and Mrs. Dubois. "He's not just leaving with her," Ben reported grimly. "He's taking her identity. He's going to become a ghost, just like he said, living off the money he stole under her family name." The cruelty of it was breathtaking. He wasn't just erasing himself. He was erasing Lara, completely replacing her with his partner in crime. Catherine, who had been listening with a face like thunder, finally spoke. "The funds he's moving. Where are they from?" Maria Flores turned from her screen, her expression grim. "Some of it is from the high-risk loans Arthur identified, but the bulk of it's from his investors. We're cross-referencing the transfer logs with the investor roster. He's been running a Ponzi scheme, Catherine. A massive one." The room fell silent. A Ponzi scheme. The words were an indictment of everything the Ashford name had once stood for. Damien wasn't just a reckless businessman. He was a common thief on a grand scale, preying on the very people who had trusted his family for decades. He was using funds from new investors to pay fictitious dividends to older ones, creating an illusion of spectacular success while siphoning off the principal for himself and Chloe. He's been liquidating the trust funds his father built, the real, tangible assets, and using them as the seed money to give his scam legitimacy. Maria continued. Then he used that reputation to bring in hundreds of millions from outside investors. Most of that money is now gone, funneled into these shell accounts. The transfer on Friday is the last step. It's all the remaining cash in the entire enterprise. Our best estimate is he's planning to wire over $75 million to an account in the Caymans. $75 million. The number was so vast, it was almost meaningless. Lara thought of the nursery she had so carefully prepared, the tiny sneakers on the dresser. Damien was planning to steal a fortune and start a new life while his own son was born into a legacy of debt, shame, and criminality. The prenuptial agreement, Lara said, her voice hard. "Can he use it to leave me with nothing?" Arthur looked at her, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. "He can certainly try. But it is my firm professional opinion that the document is void. It was signed under fraudulent misrepresentation. You were intentionally deceived as to the nature of the document you were signing. When this is all over, we will have it thrown out of court. But that's a civil matter for later. Right now, we have a criminal matter to attend to." He looked around the table at his team. "Friday at 11 p.m. That's our deadline. We have less than 48 hours to stop him." The plan was audacious and risky. They could go to the federal authorities now, but Damien was clever. If he got the slightest whiff of an investigation, he would accelerate his plan, disappear, and the money would be lost forever, scattered across a dozen untraceable crypto wallets and offshore banks. The investors would lose everything, and Damien would get away. We have to let him think he's in control. Ben Carter strategized. We let him initiate the transfer. The moment the money moves, the moment he commits the final act of wire fraud, we have him. The FBI can freeze the funds mid-transfer before they land in the Caymanian bank. It's a dangerous game, Catherine warned. If we mistime it, it's the only way to recover the money and ensure he pays for what he's done. Arthur stated firmly. Lara. He'll be home between now and then. He'll act as if nothing is wrong. He'll apologize for missing the appointment. He'll be charming. You will have to play the part of the loving, forgiving wife. Can you do that? Lara thought of the ultrasound photo in her purse, of her son, swimming peacefully in the darkness, oblivious to the storm raging outside. She thought of Damien's cold voice on the phone, of the name Chloe on the burner phone's screen. Don't worry, she said, her voice devoid of any tremor. After all, he taught me everything I know about theatrics. The next 36 hours were the longest of Lara's life. She existed in a state of suspended animation, a performer playing the lead role in the tragedy of her own marriage. When Damien finally walked through the door late Thursday evening, he was the picture of contrition. He carried an enormous bouquet of white roses and a ridiculously expensive-looking teddy bear for the nursery. Izzy, my love. I am so sorry, he said, his voice dripping with the practiced sincerity she now recognized as his most dangerous weapon. He wrapped his arms around her, and she had to fight every instinct to recoil. She forced herself to lean into him to play her part. I was just so disappointed, she murmured into his shoulder, her words muffled. I know, and you had every right to be. This deal, it was a monster, but it's done. We did it. Our future is secure forever. He pulled back, beaming at her, his eyes shining with a counterfeit glow. I'm all yours now. No more trips, no more late nights. Just you, me, and our little man. He had seen the ultrasound photos she had strategically left on the kitchen island. The lie was so effortless, so complete, it was almost impressive. He spent the evening doting on her, rubbing her feet, talking about baby names, painting a beautiful picture of a future he was actively planning to detonate. Lara smiled. She nodded. She brought him his favorite scotch. And with every passing moment, the icy resolve in her heart hardened. She was no longer just a victim of his scheme. She was the bait in the trap set to catch him. Friday evening arrived with a suffocating sense of dread and anticipation. Arthur, Catherine, and Ben Carter were parked in an unmarked car down the street, monitoring communications with an FBI team on standby just minutes away. The plan was for Lara to initiate a confrontation at exactly 10:55 p.m., just as Damien was preparing to make his final move, creating a diversion while the technical agents did their work. At 10:30 p.m., Damien kissed her goodnight. I just have to send a few final confirmation emails to the Singapore office, and I'll be right up, he said, casually, heading toward his office. Lara waited in the living room, her hands clasped around a cup of chamomile tea she couldn't drink. The silence of the house was a taut wire ready to snap. At 10:54 p.m., her phone vibrated with a simple text from Arthur. Now. She took a deep breath, stood up, and walked to his office. She found him sitting at his desk, his laptop open, a look of intense concentration on his face. He was so engrossed he didn't hear her enter. "Is it done?" she asked, her voice quiet but clear in the silent room. He jumped, startled, and slammed the laptop shut. "Lara." "You scared me." "What are you doing up? I asked you a question," she said, walking further into the room. "Is the transfer done? Is our future secure?" A flicker of confusion, then annoyance, crossed his face. "What are you talking about? I told you I'm just finishing up some emails. Stop lying, Damien," she said, her voice gaining strength. She walked over to the side of the desk and picked up the wedding photo she had placed face down 2 days earlier. She held it up. Was this ever real? Or was this just part of the theatrics? The blood drained from his face. He stared at her, his charming mask finally falling away to reveal the cold, calculating man beneath. "What did you do?" he whispered, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for a listening device. "I did what any good business partner would do," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I reviewed our assets." She walked to the safe which she had left unlocked and pulled the door open. She reached inside and threw the fraudulent prenuptial agreement onto the desk in front of him. Then she pulled out the burner phone and tossed it beside the prenup. "And I familiarized myself with your exit strategy," she finished. Damien stared at the phone, then back at her, his expression a mixture of disbelief and pure fury. The game was up, and he knew it. "You went through my things," he hissed, standing up. "You stupid little girl, you have no idea what you've done." "No, I know exactly what I've done." Lara shot back, her voice rising to match his. "I've finally seen you for who you are. A liar, a thief, and a coward. You were going to run. Damien, you were going to steal $75 million and leave me. Leave your son with nothing but your shame and your debts. That money is mine." He roared, his face contorted in an ugly sneer. "I earned it. And you were just an accessory. A beautiful piece of cover to make me look stable for the investors I was fleecing. You played your part perfectly, I'll give you that. But you were never going to be part of the real future." That was always for Chloe. The casual cruelty of his confession stole her breath, but she refused to let him see her pain. At that moment, the office door swung open and Catherine Ashford stepped inside, her face a mask of cold fury. Arthur Harrison was right behind her. "Get away from her!" Catherine commanded, her voice like ice. Damien stared at his mother, momentarily stunned. "You're with her. Against your own son. You are not the man your father raised," Catherine said, her voice trembling with rage and heartbreak. "You are a disgrace to his name and his memory. You preyed on our friends, you stole from your own family, and you were going to abandon your pregnant wife. You are no son of mine." Cornered and desperate, Damien's rage turned to violence. He lunged not at Lara, but towards the desk, grabbing for the laptop. "I can still fix this. I can still move the money," he yelled, trying to shove past Arthur. Arthur, a surprisingly solid man for his age, stood his ground. "It's over, Damien. It's not over until I say it is." Damien screamed, shoving Arthur hard against the wall. He scrambled for the laptop, but before he could open it, the serene quiet of the mansion was shattered by the sound of splintering wood as the front door burst open. Heavy footsteps thundered down the hall, and seconds later, 2 FBI agents in tactical gear appeared in the doorway. "Damien Ashford," one of them yelled. You are under arrest." Damien froze his hand, hovering over the laptop, his face a canvas of utter defeat. The fight drained out of him, replaced by a hollow, pathetic emptiness. His grand escape, his brilliant plan had crumbled to dust around him. As the agents cuffed him and read him his rights, his eyes found Lara's. There was no remorse in them, no apology, only a cold, venomous hatred. As they led him away, a broken man stripped of his power and his charm, Catherine wrapped a protective arm around Lara's shoulders. Lara stood tall, her hand resting on her belly, watching the architect of her pain being led out of her life forever. The gilded cage was broken. The aftermath was a media firestorm. Tech mogul's Ponzi scheme crumbles, screamed the headlines. The story had everything the public craved. Wealth betrayal. A beautiful pregnant wife, a secret mistress, and a spectacular fall from grace. For weeks, Lara's face was splashed across news sites and television screens. She became a reluctant symbol, the wronged woman who brought down a titan. But behind the closed doors of Arthur Harrison's office, the real work was being done. The FBI, thanks to the team's perfectly timed intervention, had successfully frozen the $75 million wire transfer. The money was seized, destined to be painstakingly returned to the dozens of investors Damien had defrauded. Chloe Dubois was arrested at the private airfield, her designer luggage and dreams of a Caymanian paradise confiscated. She quickly turned on Damien, offering testimony in exchange for a lighter sentence, detailing the cold, methodical nature of their criminal enterprise. Arthur Harrison, true to his word, filed a motion to have the prenuptial agreement nullified. Armed with Lara's testimony about the deceptive signing and Chloe's confirmation that the marriage was a calculated part of the fraud, the judge threw out the document without a second thought, calling it an egregious act of coercion and deceit. Lara was officially untangled from the immediate financial wreckage. There was, however, no family fortune left to speak of. What hadn't been stolen by Damien was swallowed by lawsuits and legal fees. The magnificent house on the hill, the cars, the art, it was all seized and sold off, pieces of a life that had never truly been real. Catherine Ashford was a pillar of quiet strength through it all. She bore the public humiliation of her son's crimes with stoic dignity. Without hesitation, she sold her own considerable assets, her jewelry, her apartment in New York, her collection of fine art, things that were hers alone, untouched by Damien's ruin. She used the money to create a new, smaller trust. Not for herself, but for her grandson and his mother. "This is not charity," Lara Catherine said firmly, as they sat in the small, sunlit garden of the modest but charming house she had bought for them in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood, far from the flash and phoniness of their old life. "This is restitution. This is a family repairing the damage one of its own has done. You and this baby are my family now." The months passed in a blur of legal proceedings and healing. Lara went to therapy, learning to unpack the trauma of the deep betrayal. She learned to trust her own judgment again, to separate the man she thought she loved from the monster he had become. She learned to forgive herself for being deceived, realizing that her only crime had been to love someone who was incapable of loving her back. She and Catherine built a new kind of relationship, one forged not in social obligation, but in shared adversity and a common purpose. They painted the new nursery together, this time in a cheerful, sunny yellow. They took walks in the park. They cooked meals. They talked for hours. Lara learned about Catherine's life, her dreams before she became Mrs. Ashford, and saw the strong, independent woman who existed beneath the Chanel suits. In turn, Catherine saw Lara not as a simple girl, but as a resilient, courageous woman who had saved them all from a worse fate. One crisp autumn afternoon, Lara's water broke. The labor was long and difficult, but she was not alone. Catherine was by her side the entire time, holding her hand, breathing with her, offering a strength that was both maternal and fierce. And then with one final push, he was there. A wave of relief and a love so powerful it eclipsed everything that had come before, washed over her. He was perfect, with a full head of dark hair and the tiniest, most perfect hands she had ever seen. The nurse laid him on her chest, and Lara cried tears of joy, of release, of profound, unadulterated love. Catherine leaned over her own eyes filled with tears and gently stroked the baby's head. "Oh, he's beautiful, Lara. He's just beautiful." "What will you name him?" she asked softly. Lara looked down at the tiny, wrinkled face of her son. He was not a reminder of Damien. He was not the product of a lie. He was his own person, a blank slate, a new beginning. He was her reason to be strong, her anchor in the world. She would build his life not on a foundation of wealth and secrets, but on truth, resilience, and the unwavering love of the two women who would raise him. She smiled a real, genuine smile that reached her eyes for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. "Michael," she said. "His name is Michael." Lara's story is a harrowing reminder that the most beautiful facades can hide the darkest secrets. She thought she was living a fairy tale, only to discover her gilded cage was built on a foundation of lies designed to break her. But what Damien Ashford saw as weakness, her trust, her love, her focus on her coming child, was actually the source of her greatest strength. When pushed to the brink, she didn't just survive. She fought back. With the unexpected help of her mother-in-law, she unraveled a massive criminal conspiracy and protected her son's future. Her journey from a deceived wife to a powerful protector shows us that true wealth isn't in mansions or bank accounts, but in courage, resilience, and the unbreakable bonds we forge in the fires of adversity. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button. Share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more true-life dramas that explore the depths of human resilience. Click the notification bell so you never miss an update.